Dietary sodium and cardiovascular disease risk. The causal link between the habitual intake of salt intake and blood pressure has been established across epidemiological, experimental studies of migration, and intervention studies.
Salt! It's like my second favorite food group, after chocolate, of course. Hey everyone, Lisa Green here for D-News. There are warnings abound about the dangers of a high-sodium diet, and it's true that most packaged foods are full of the stuff, probably half the reason it tastes so good, to be honest. But just how terrible is salt? Is there such a thing as not enough? A new international study in the New England Journal of Medicine monitored over 100,000 people in 17 countries for 4 years and found that those who ate moderate amounts of salt were healthier than those who consumed a lot of salt and those who only consumed a little salt. They defined moderate as 3,000 to 6,000 milligrams a day. For perspective, Americans eat 3,400 milligrams of salt a day, and the World Health Organization recommends that people only consume about 2,000 milligrams a day. The scientists found that those who consume between 3,000 and 6,000 milligrams of salt a day have a lower risk of cardiovascular issues. They also had a lower risk of death over the 4-year study. They tracked the patient's salt intake with daily urine samples in the morning, which is a reliable way to measure how much sodium and potassium the individual has consumed. The potassium was important to track because it protects against some of the negative effects of salt, like raising your blood pressure. Those who ate more than 1,500 milligrams of potassium a day were also less likely to have heart disease or to die. Not that surprising, both because of potassium's effect on salt and because potassium is in a lot of fruit and veggies. Those people probably have healthier diets. This study emphasizes what other recent studies have been finding. It's possible to get too little salt, especially amongst generally healthy people. And it's possible that all the high sodium here is a little misguided. Another study last April in the American Journal of Hypertension found that those who consume between 2,500 and 5,000 milligrams of salt a day have lower mortality rates, and that low sodium diets could be harmful to the healthy. The Institute of Medicine also released a report last year finding that consuming under 2,300 milligrams a day didn't prevent heart disease. Still, the American Heart Association isn't convinced. They say the methods of the new study are questionable, especially how they measure the salt in people's urine. There's also another study in the same issue of the New England Journal of Medicine with directly conflicting findings. The second study, which was carried out at Harvard, found that 1.65 million global cardiovascular deaths are linked with high sodium consumption. So unfortunately, because the evidence is so conflicted, there's no final word on salt yet. In the meantime, it appears to be safer to err.
It is possible to achieve significant reduction in blood pressure by reducing salt intake of people with and without hypertension. Increasing salt intake is associated with an increasing incidence of stroke and total cardiovascular events. The systematic review identified 13 relevant and appropriate studies published between 1996 and 2009. Despite being necessary for the proper function of the body, the salt consumed in excess is one of the main causes of hypertension. High blood pressure causes the arteries which carry blood through the body lose elasticity and become more rigid, indirect the work of the heart and kidneys. Hypertension itself is a cause of hypertensive crisis, causing up to 5% of death from cardiovascular disease.
Lifestyle medicine is the use of lifestyle interventions directed at the treatment, management, and prevention of disease.
Hey folks, I just want to take a minute to the negative effects of having too much salt circulating in your body. By better understanding the effects of salt on your body, you may better be prepared to manage and restrict your salt intake when appropriate. If you haven't watched my brief lecture on how salt specifically raises your blood pressure, I would encourage you to check that out. Typically, consuming too much salt is something that occurs over time, and the disease process it contributes to are chronic diseases. However, I will briefly mention that there are some acute processes as well. Too much salt in an acute setting can lead to something called hypernatremia, or too much salt in your blood. This occurs because of dysregulation of sodium, water, or both. And this is a different disease entirely, and so I'm going to focus strictly on the chronic effects of sodium and hypertension. Let's pretend for a moment that we're talking about patient X, who has chronic hypertension. His hypertension is caused in part because he consumes far too much salt every day. The American Heart Association recommends 1,500 milligrams per day, but he consumes 3 times that, 4,500 milligrams per day. The following is a list of diseases he is at risk for, secondary to his high salt levels and subsequent high blood pressure. First thing is kidney damage. Over time, the excess fluid in circulation and elevated blood pressure can actually damage the kidneys. One of the roles of the kidney is to filter your blood, remove waste products and toxic products, and send them off to your bladder in the form of urine. When your kidneys are damaged, these natural filters stop working as effectively. And as these filters stop working, toxic substances begin to build up in your bloodstream and can cause all kinds of secondary issues. And this is why people with end-stage kidney disease require dialysis, because their kidneys are no longer filtering or functioning appropriately, and we use a machine to substitute that job for them. And the second thing is arterial damage. Chronically elevated blood pressure puts stress on the walls of your arteries. Because these arteries need to maintain pressure, they begin to thicken and stiffen to compensate for that increased pressure. This process is known as arteriosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries. At the same time, these thickened arteries can actually begin to narrow, leading to arteriostenosis, or narrowing of the arteries. This combination of hardening and narrowing is a setup for disaster. Over time, these damaged arteries can dilate and burst, can form blood clots they send elsewhere, or get so narrow that blood can no longer flow through them properly. And since the artery's job is to deliver oxygenated blood to the organs that they flow into, this can lead to organ damage downstream as those organs become deprived of oxygen. The third thing it can really do is heart damage. Several things happen to heart muscle and arteries when chronically elevated blood pressure. Under the stress of pumping against that high blood pressure, the heart muscle actually hypertrophies. It gets bigger, much like skeletal muscle in an athlete. The arteries of the heart, known as the coronary arteries, also can narrow and stiffen like arteries anywhere else. And unfortunately, the increase in heart muscle means that it requires more oxygen to do its job, and when combined with those narrow and hardened arteries, you have a classic setup for a heart attack. High salt can also cause brain damage. The arterial damage I mentioned can lead to reduced blood flow to the brain. The narrowing and hardening of the arteries can occur in the arteries of the neck, known as the carotid arteries. As this process evolves, if the blood pressure remains elevated, parts of the narrowed carotid artery can break off under pressure and can end up somewhere in the brain circulation. Once there, the oxygen-deprived brain tissue can die, leading to a full-blown stroke. Another way that this can manifest is a series of mini-strokes over time that can cause a type of dementia known as vascular dementia. There are a few other things that can also occur. Chronically elevated sodium has been linked to osteoporosis, stomach cancer, kidney stones, and headaches. In addition to putting you at risk for the other diseases, heavy salt intake can manifest with these signs and symptoms, and they're all essentially signs of water retention. It includes puffiness, bloating, weight gain, and excessive thirst. So in conclusion, just a few key points here. Chronically consuming too much salt or sodium can lead to hypertension. This hypertension can lead to damage to your kidneys, heart, brain, and blood vessels. It also increases your risk for osteoporosis, stomach cancer, kidney stones, and headaches. And you may also notice puffiness, bloating, weight gain, and excessive thirst.
It is a chronic disease that often requires lifelong treatment and raises much the risk of more serious disorder. Hypertension is the leading cause of stroke and one of the most important of stroke, which are two of the most frequent causes of death and disability in your society. Stroke or stroke. Broad brain hemorrhage such as stroke causing approximately 1/3 of death from circular disease, but a high percent of people who survive a stroke suffer serious physical and neurological sequelae for the rest of their life. Heart failure and stroke, excessive salt intake also has direct adverse effects, not mediated by hypertension of the heart muscle, which also worsens the functionality of the heart through diseases such as heart attack or heart failure. When the heart is unable to pump enough blood to the body. Recommendation: the reduction of about 6 grams of salt recommended consumption that the World Health Organization approves. According to the recent report by the World Health Federation, there are more than 5 million deaths a year from stores worldwide and about 17 million deaths from cardiovascular disease.